an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Time of Contempt, Chapter 4. In this chapter, it turns out that this big meeting between all of these wizards was, it appears at least, a ploy to get everyone in one place so that Nilfgaard could make a move. I am not entirely sure what the move is other than to get rid of a bunch of other mages, but we'll talk about it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Melanie for commissioning this episode. So some of you may remember that the last episode of coverage, that it was like a little bit over a month ago now, I think. I was getting really frustrated because it was a conversation between Geralt and Nilfgaard. Is that his name? But he is the mage that winds up being behind this whole coup this time around. And I felt like I was having trouble parsing what was actually important for me to remember and what wasn't, and the things that I didn't have a lot of context for that seemed like they were dwelt on and that they might be important, but I wasn't sure. Generally, it was hard for me to follow, and I talked about it with Melanie afterwards. She was messaging me. And initially, Melanie was like, do you just want to stop covering this because you seemed really frustrated? And I don't want to do that at all. Like this, I want to understand what's going on, and I want to make sure, for my part, I'm covering this as you have paid me to cover this, Melanie, and those of you who are listening because you're interested in what I have to say about a book that, ostensibly you like or have read and know about. And I just want to make sure that I am doing a decent job talking about the things that you want me to talk about. That's really the part that I get the most anxious about as a podcaster doing these commissions, is I want to make sure that you are getting the kind of coverage that feels like I am competent, basically, that I am actually understanding major themes, that there are details that I'm talking about that matter to you. And what's difficult with this, because of the lack of context or the dropping in of details that I'm not sure I should be worrying about or not, is that I am never quite confident that I am focusing on what listeners want me to focus on. Does that make sense? So just generally, I'm less frustrated by not understanding what's going on than I am by the idea of letting people down who are listening and wanting to hear me address something really specific, and then I kind of don't address it because I'm not even aware that's supposed to be important. So I just really, that's the main thing for me, is I can deal with my own, because what Melanie said when she first read these books, and she's realizing now that, and I feel very comforted by this, to be honest. She was saying that when she first read these, she sort of let things just wash over her and didn't worry about trying to follow the deep particulars of the politics of the, histories and things like that. And just sort of went along for the ride. And when I was going over some stuff last episode, not only did Melanie not know, and she's read these books before, but she told me in comments later, or in a chat later, that she actually found an entire Reddit thread dedicating to trying to figure out what the last chapter was really about. And that's really all I need to know in terms of how I'm covering this. If other people who are familiar with this series are having as much difficulty as I am with following this, that makes me feel a lot better. Because, like I said, the main thing is I don't want to let you guys down. I don't want you to be paying for something and feeling like, oh, what's the point? She doesn't even get what's happening. Like, that's my biggest fear. And if y'all are also not entirely sure what something meant, as long as we're on the same page with that, then fine. Because it seems like Melanie continues to enjoy these books, even though she doesn't get a lot of this, these details that have sort of been like thwarting me. And if she can continue to enjoy these without knowing all of the ins and outs of everything, then that tells me I don't need to be so hung up on all of it. And I can just sort of like let things wash over me too without fixating so completely. And that's, this is something that's really different, because if I'm covering something like the Dresden Files, in that, or, I've compared this a few times to Game of Thrones, knowing the historical significance of things and remembering rulers' names and the positioning of certain countries and what resources they have control over and that sort of thing is key to understanding the direction the story is going, to understanding big like reveals or twists that happen later. But if people are looking back and they're not understanding a scene, then that tells me it wound up really not mattering that much to the overall story, so I don't need to figure it out. And if that's the case, if this is all sort of just like background noise to make it feel like a fuller, richer world, but it's not actually crucial to the plot of the story, then I can totally deal with that, and I will just leave it as being background. And unless somebody in the chat is telling me differently, I won't get wrapped up in trying to parse every single detail. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that right out of the gate, because I know that Melanie was worried because she felt like I was like just really not enjoying the story. And that wasn't what was happening. It was that I actually really do like the parts of the story that I understand, but I just want to make sure that I'm not missing totally obvious shit and making everybody like slap their hand to their head while they listen going, oh my God, she's missing the whole thing. So, don't worry about it, Melanie. And if you say that, you were able to like just sail through this stuff, I'm going to attempt to like let that go and just focus on main plot points this time around. And hopefully that's like the best way to approach this. So chapter 4, interestingly, starts off with a sort of, I'm going to back up a little bit. The end of chapter 3 was the Witcher and Yennefer together, and he tries to think about things that will give her joy and all of these like, beautiful moments and whatnot, so that she can like hear pretty things in his thoughts, basically, to calm her and make her feel better. When we start off this next chapter, we have Ciri, who is having a series of sort of, it seems like a combination of dreams and also like she's sort of, what's the word I want? Like she's like astral traveling a little bit, or at least like she occupies the body of a bird at one point. She heard the cry of a raptor and suddenly became it. She was flying with enormous speed, and beneath her was a stormy sea. So why I'm bringing up Geralt last time is that I wonder sometimes with her going through this stuff, if Yennefer could have seen this all going through Ciri's head if she were in the same room with her. Because they know that she can prophesy, like that happens, and that's sort of part of what seems to like set everything in motion a little bit later. But I don't know if Yennefer is aware of the extent of Ciri's abilities. And if they were sharing a room, would she see all of this the same way that Ciri is? I'm just curious about that. She saw a small button-eyed doll and suddenly was that doll, and all around her teemed the darkness pulsing with the sound of cicadas. She saw a large black cat and white tomcat. Or she saw a large black and white tomcat and suddenly was that cat, surrounded by a somber house, darkened wood paneling, and the smell of candles and old books. So, yeah, there is this basically kind of Arya-esque moment where she takes over this cat and can... I don't even know, because like with the Arya moment, and I'm talking about Song of Ice and Fire... it feels like she can control what's going on. I have trouble deciphering how much control Ciri has. It seems like she has pretty good control over it because she makes the cat meow a little bit later on when she's like trying to warn them not to open the door. The cat's yowling a bunch. So I'm going to say that she does manage to completely take over this creature. And what happened? It's like weird because she's telling these people not to open the door because death is behind it, but she doesn't seem fully to comprehend that these guys are not her friends. You know, it's more like an impulse of her just like wanting to preserve someone's life for the sake of that life and the sacredness of that life. But when it comes down to facts, these dudes are dangers to her. And these are the guys that Geralt came and spoke to earlier. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Ciri, at this point, is noticing that there are all of these protective charms on the room that Yennefer has placed there. And, like, you know, allegedly it's all to keep her protected, but she's also aware that a lot of them are to keep her inside so that she can't leave. And she has some sort of resentment over the fact that she's being treated this way. She's even thinking back on her conversation when she met up with Geralt after being so apart from him for so long. And it says, the meeting with Geralt itself had filled Ciri with sadness and disappointment. The Witcher had been taciturn, tense, restless, and demonstrably insincere. Their conversation had faltered and limped along, losing its way in sentences and questions which suddenly broke off. The Witcher's eyes and thoughts kept running away from her and fleeing into the distance. Ciri knew where they were running to. So, this is an interesting thing. Like, you know, I don't at all think that Ciri has like a crush on Geralt. It's definitely, she just wants his affection in a fatherly sort of way. And the fact that he is just so distracted by this woman that he's into is just frustrating. You know, it's not like she's jealous. It's just, she is jealous, but it's not, you know, a romantic jealousy. It's just an attention sort of jealousy. It sort of reminds me of what I've heard happens when only children's parents then have another child and they're so used to being the center of everything, and suddenly their parents are paying all this attention to this infant that's like invading everything. And I kind of felt bad about that. Like, honestly, her being so disappointed with her meetup with him after going through all the trouble that she went through in order to see him again. Like, it worked out in that she gives this like gift to Yennefer of her and Geralt resolving everything and being together again. And in that respect, it's worth it. But I really did sort of feel for her that this is somebody that she missed and that she trusts and loves. And meeting up with him again just didn't have the effect that she thought it would, of feeling seen, of having companionship again, or security of being with him. And later on, it's not like Geralt doesn't have her back. He 100% does. He's super concerned about making sure that she's okay. So it's not like his affection for her has dwindled really at all. It's just the whole relationship between the two of them is changing because she's growing. She doesn't need him the way that she did anymore. He is aware that she's not really going to be a Witcher the way he had intended when he first took her in and was starting to train her. So his investment in her in those respects has gone away. But he still cares about her as a person. It's just hard for her to, you know, understand those changes. And that's even something that happens when you are a child and start to grow. Even if, you know, another sibling doesn't come into the equation, you start to see your parents treating you differently because now you're an adult and they know that you can take care of yourself. And that can be a really hard adjustment when you are somebody who is used to being doted on, to suddenly be left to your own devices on things. You know, most of us tend to just really crave independence, but there is also a bittersweet aspect to that where you want to be on your own and able to do what you want, but you still want to be able to come home to the kind of like childlike affection that you used to have. And really that's not possible anymore. Once you are an adult and start to make your own way, other things are going to also change. It's just, you know, it's growing up. It's just kind of tough, and she's really going through it. So she's in this cat's body, basically. And it's these two men that Geralt had come and seen earlier. There's Fen and Codringer. And remember them, Codringer was they're lawyers, and like everybody had suspected, or at least Geralt had suspected, that Fen wasn't real. But it turns out that he is, and he's just, first of all, a dwarf, and second of all, has no legs. So he doesn't have the, he's not front and center in the business and like doing the customer facing stuff. He's in the background because he's incredibly intelligent, doing a lot of the research and, setting up, while Codringer is the one that tends to like be dealing with customers. And this is the part where Codringer is saying, have you only now realized who Cirilla, Princess of Cintra, really is? The child of the Elder Blood, the last offshoot of that bloody tree of hatred, the last branch, and on it, the last poisoned apple. And Fen replies, the Elder Blood, so far back in time. Pavetta, Calanthe, Adelia, Elen, Fiona, and Falca. That's impossible. Falca had no children. Secondly, Fiona was the legitimate daughter of... And Codringer interrupts and says, first of all, we don't know anything about Falco's youth. Secondly, you know that I'm overcome with spasms of mirth at the sound of the word legitimate. I believe that document because, in my opinion, it's authentic and speaks the truth. Fiona, Pavetta's great-great-grandmother, was the daughter of Falca, that monster in human form. I don't believe in all those insane predictions, prophecies, and other poppycock, but when I now recall the Ithlin forecasts, and Fen interrupts and says, tainted blood, and Codringer goes on, tainted, contaminated, accursed. It can be understood in various ways. And according to legend, if you recall, it was Falca who was accursed because Lara Doran A. Shidal had put a curse on her mother. To which Fen says, those are just stories. And he says, stories stop being stories when people begin to believe in them. Someone believes in the story of the Elder Blood. In particular, in any part that says, from Falca's blood will be born an avenger who will destroy the old world and build a new one on its ruins. And Fen says Cirilla is supposed to be that avenger? No, not Cirilla, her son. Cirilla, irrespective of her will, who is because she's being hunted by Emrys, Emperor of Nilfgaard, is to become the mother of the heir to the throne, mother to an arch-prince, the arch-prince of darkness, the descendant and avenger of that she-devil Falca. The destruction and subsequent rebuilding of the world is meant, it seems to me, to proceed in a guided and controlled way. And Fen says that maybe we should tell Geralt about this, like, connection that we have made, and Codringer basically is like, you know what? Fuck Geralt. First of all, he's trying to act like he isn't working for gain, but the truth is that he's just not working for his own gain. He doesn't know what he has stepped into. He doesn't understand Rince's connection to anything. He's just hunting Rince because all he knows is that Rince is trying to hurt Ciri. Should I inform him and so help the people planning to capture this golden egg-laying hen in order to blackmail Emhyr or ingratiate themselves with him? I'm not that stupid. games are either worth a candle or they aren't. Don't you understand what's fallen into our hands? A golden hen which will lay for us and no one else, and it'll be a huge egg. And this is when they get interrupted. So Ciri is listening to all of this as the cat, but I guess what my assumption is here is that she isn't completely like, it's not like she's fully in that cat's body and thinking as herself. It's kind of like when she takes over the cat's body, like her mind gets a little bit scrambled and she's able to see things, but not really make sense of them. And like later on when she wakes up, she doesn't remember anything. So she starts yowling a warning when Fen is going to go, or no, it's Codringer that's going to go and answer the door, even though she really should just let these guys die. Like, they wind up dying anyway, it winds up being a little bit of a blessing for her. But yeah, these dudes think that like they're going to be able to capture her themselves, I guess. And I just don't really, I'm not entirely sure what Codringer's play is going to be. Is he going to like use her as a bargaining chip maybe? To try and like, you know, bargain with the King of Nilfgaard to hand her over. I don't entirely know, but the whole prophecy of the Elder Blood, it's so funny to me how differently we all interpret things, because it's written that she will be I'm trying to find, oh yeah, here it is. From Falco's blood will be born an avenger who will destroy the old world and build a new one on its ruins. This is something that is being interpreted as basically Armageddon, it seems like, right? And I feel like I remember the story of Falco. And if you guys want to remind me, let me know, because I did read about that, right? But really all it says is that the old world is going to be destroyed and a new one will begin. And maybe it's just that I'm a millennial living through one of like the worst periods of American history, in my opinion, like, you know, modern American history, I should say. But I really can't hear that and be like worried about it. To me, the idea of like doing away with the old world and the old way of doing things and, you know, being able to establish something new and fresh and unencumbered by old traditions or, you know, old power structures that were corrupt. That sounds great to me. That sounds like what we want. And so these old men who are weirdly in a position of power in some ways, they're not rulers or anything, but they have possession of some really important knowledge, being afraid of this and really only seeing it as her being like a harbinger of doom is kind of amusing and very much on brand, I feel like, you know? So yeah, I'm kind of like, I hope Ciri manages this, but she doesn't seem to remember anything about it when she wakes up. So I don't think she knows what her role is supposed to be. And of course, this is all based on whether or not you believe the story they're spinning here, which is that Nilfgaard is going to try and like forcibly marry and impregnate her. And she doesn't seem to have any plans in this direction. It would be, I'm not, you know, sure who can keep her, like who can force her into that. I have a hard time believing that anybody could capture Ciri and then make her marry them. That doesn't seem like the Ciri that I know. But also it might depend on if they had some sort of leverage over her. And the only leverage that I could think of that could make her do something like that, if she didn't want to, would be threatening to harm Yennefer or Triss or Geralt. And that would imply that they capture not only her, but also Yennefer and Triss and Geralt. And Vilgefortz doesn't seem ready to capture anybody. Like, he goes after Geralt, but he basically only, like, maims him, and he doesn't capture him. Of course, they don't have Ciri at the moment, so one, maybe you could say that he doesn't need Geralt yet, but I would think that having Geralt, if you understood their relationship, and maybe that's what it is that he doesn't understand their relationship, but he could use Geralt as a means of forcing Ciri out of the woodwork because she wants to make sure that he's okay. And maybe Vilgefortz just isn't completely aware of what they mean to one another. Or Vilgefortz just doesn't really care about Ciri in the end, because he's allied with Nilfgaard, but he also sort of makes it sound like he doesn't really give a fuck. It's a sort of confusing thing. We'll get to that. But anyway, what these two guys know turns out to not really matter, because they get a knock on the door and these people come in and completely, like, they first kill Codringer very, very quickly. It's like an instantaneous, like, weird thing with a magical cord that, like, grabs him and pulls him towards them. And it's two human beings and a half-elf who come in. And not only do they kill Codringer, but then they, like, cover Fen with lighter fluid, basically, and scrolls, and light him up. And it's really awful. Like, burning somebody alive to me is just the epitome of cruelty. There are a lot of things that probably are more cruel, but there's something, like, there's cruelty in torture, of course. But I always view torture as, like, the means to an end. And so the torture is not something that you're doing for the sake of it. You're doing it because you need information and you want somebody to tell you something, which, while still despicable and awful, I do kind of understand. But burning someone to death, all you want to accomplish is their death. And if all you want to accomplish is their death, there is no reason to make them suffer like that. You don't have to do it unless you are trying to set an example for other people in, like, burning at the stake. But that's not what's happening here. This isn't even just a setting of an example. There's nobody here to see this. They are burning him to death when they have the option of killing him outright. And they don't take it because they want to be cruel. It's just for the fun of it, I guess. And not only is this, like, is this somebody who is helpless in that they have been taken unawares, but this is somebody who is crippled and just has no way to defend themselves. So them choosing to add this humiliation on top of everything is really gross. So anyway, Ciri, as the cat, manages to, like, get away before the house goes up. But she wakes up and she can't really remember what happened. And then she notices that all of these charms that are all over the room, or were all over the room, have suddenly gone. And she knows this means that something happened. So she gets up and she starts to get dressed. Ciri was already wondering whether to go and wake Dandelion when she felt a strong pulse and a rush of blood in her ears. The shaft of moonlight coming through the window became a road. At the end of the road, far away, was a door. The door opened, and Yennefer stood there. "Come with me." Other doors opened behind the sorceress's back, one after another, an endless succession. The black shapes of columns crystallized from the darkness. Not columns, perhaps they're statues. I'm dreaming, thought Ciri. I don't believe my eyes. I'm dreaming. That isn't a road. It's a light. It's a shaft of light. I can't go along that. Come with me. She obeyed. So this was a confusing moment, and what I'm assuming this is a portal that Yennefer opened to get Ciri out of the room without actually having to, like, step foot outside. I'm not positive, but I feel like that's what happened there. And that all of the, like, doors behind her are other exits from this, like, from this way, if that makes sense. So then we jump to Geralt, and he winds up because he doesn't want to. It's the first paragraph is funny. It's been highlighted a bunch of times, according to Kindle. Had it not been for the foolish scruples of the Witcher and his impractical principles, many subsequent events would have run their course quite differently. Many events would probably have not taken place at all, and the history of the world would have unfolded in an alternative way. But the history of the world unfolded as it unfolded, the sole cause of which was that the Witcher had scruples. So he wakes up and he has to pee, and he could pee out the window and just like into a pot of plants, but he feels like that's a dick move, so he decides to properly go outside into the garden. And when he does this, he stumbles across a whole fucking coup. And it says he feels the spell, and it says anyone else would have turned on their heels at once and walked briskly back to where they'd come from, pretending they hadn't heard anything. And then perhaps the history of the world would have unfolded differently. But the Witcher had scruples and was accustomed to acting according to foolish, impractical principles. When he ran into the cloister and the corridor, he saw that a fight was in progress. Several tough-looking men in grey jerkins were in the act of overpowering a short sorcerer who had been thrown to the ground. The fight was being directed by Dijkstra, chief of Vizimir, king of Redania's intelligence service. Before Geralt was able to take any action, he was overpowered himself. So Dijkstra, like, he gets, Geralt gets gripped up, and Dijkstra is just like, look, I'm not going to do anything to you right now. We're just needing to keep you out of the way because we had a thing we're in the middle of, and you've just kind of stumbled onto this by accident, and we don't really have a plan for what to do with you. And we don't really have a lot of time either. So he keeps him off to the side. And Ciri also basically says the same thing. She's over here, like, at one point because the little sorcerer is Terra Nova, I'm pretty sure. And she orders him to be handcuffed, which is, on its surface, doesn't seem that terrible, but apparently it's a metal that is specifically meant to keep him from using his magic, and also has like a profound effect in general on wizards' well-being, because they are so intrinsically linked. I mean, I've talked before about how in this world, it's not like people who have wizardly powers. Wizards are a different race, right? Magicians are a different race. So this really fucks with them, and he winds up like throwing up after these are put on him. So it's more than just like the act of trying to keep him under control. It's a humiliating thing to do to somebody, and it's really like, it's essentially drugging them in a way. And he's yelling at her not to put them on. And he says, I'm a member of the chapter. And she says, you were. Now you're a common traitor, and you will be treated as such. And you're a lousy whore and she hits him. And it turns out that she has brass knuckles on, and his head jerks back from this hit so hard that Geralt almost thinks the guy like got his neck broken. But he just kind of like gets knocked out. And this is when she like looks up and sees him, and it's just sort of like, God damn it. Like, she's just irritated about being interrupted, about having this extra, like, wrench thrown into everything, especially because everybody knows that Geralt is with Yennefer, and apparently Yennefer is not going to approve of what Ciri is doing here. So let's see. She walked away, followed by the Redanians, who were dragging Terra Nova behind them. On a signal from Dijkstra, the thugs released Geralt. The spy came closer and looked the Witcher in the eye. Ciri says, the problem is I don't know about Yennefer. I don't know either, said Detmold, shrugging his shoulders. In any case, he's mixed up in this now. He's seen too much. Take him to Phillipa. She'll decide. Put him in handcuffs. So this is the part that I'm a little bit confused about. Phillipa is the magician that can turn into an owl, right? That she's the one. And Phillipa, they're talking here because Ciri, I think, is on the side of the chapter, right? But no, Kira has to be on the side of Nilfgaard because Dijkstra's on the side of Nilfgaard and she's working with Dijkstra. So when they say, go bring him to Phillipa and let her decide, that makes it sound like Phillipa is also on the side of Nilfgaard. But later on, I thought it was Phillipa that agreed to help them and was like helping Ciri escape also. So is Phillipa just playing two sides here, or am I misunderstanding who is who? So let's see. Haven't you got it yet, you idiot? That decent sorcerers who are faithful to kings aren't asleep tonight? That they didn't go to bed at all? Only traitors who have sold out to Nilfgaard are asleep in their warm beds. Oh, okay. I have it backwards. Dijkstra isn't working for Nilfgaard. Dijkstra is working against the people who are selling out to Nilfgaard. And so he is on the side of Priscilla for now. But then later on, he kind of says, either way, well, we'll get there. Okay, but I think I figured it out now. I think I got it straight. Okay. Only traitors who have sold out to Nilfgaard are asleep in their warm beds. Traitors who were preparing a putsch of their own. And this was a word that I had not seen before, which means basically coup. But for a later date. They didn't know their plans had been rumbled and their intentions second-guessed. And as you can see, they're being dragged out of those warm beds, getting smacked in the teeth with knuckle dusters, and having dimeritium bracelets wrapped around their wrists. The traitors are finished. If you don't want to go down with them, stop playing the fool. Did Vilgefortz manage to recruit you yesterday evening? Or perhaps Yennefer already did. Talk and fast before your mouth is flooded with shit. And Geralt doesn't answer him and is just basically like, take me to Priscilla. I'll talk to Priscilla. I don't need to talk to you, which I do think is kind of ballsy. Just basically being like, you're not worth why am I going to talk to you? Bring me the person in charge. I'm not wasting my fucking time. So they head up there, and it's really weird that it turns out like this shit is all going on, but there's still like the banquet also happening, because a lot, like, I sort of was under the mistaken impression after this scene that everything had got shook up and that anybody who was a magician was going to be like, you know, a sorcerer or an enchanter, that they were all going to be involved in this kerfuffle. But it turns out there's a good number of people who are like not involved with the chapter that don't know this is even happening, which is bananas to me. So let's see. Sabrina, like Keir Metz, was dressed in grey men's apparel. Geralt realized it was possible to identify the different factions within the putsch by their uniforms. Triss Merigold crouched on the floor, hunched over a body which was lying in a pool of blood. Geralt recognized the body as that of Lydia van Bredevoort. He knew her by her hair and silk dress. He couldn't have recognized her by her face because it was no longer a face. It was a horrifying, macabre skull with shining teeth exposed halfway up the cheeks and a distorted, sunken jaw, the bones badly knitted together. And there's a little asterisk on this spot for the Kindle, and when I clicked it, it said, footnote. The lower part of Lydia Branbridevoort's face, as seen in society and her portraits, was actually an illusion. Experiments on a mysterious artifact had left her with burns and throat and larynx mutations. So I kind of like details like that because it doesn't seem like the mysterious artifact she was working on has anything to do with anything. And I don't think we're ever going to get told like what was up with that. But I like knowing that that shit is out there and people are, you know, messing around with stuff that maybe they shouldn't, and just that's intense, you know. And I also wonder about like the mutations and the way that she was disfigured. The illusion can make it look like she wasn't, but functionally, was she able to eat and drink and breathe and like do all of that stuff normally? Or did she also have to make an illusion to make it look like she was eating when she wasn't? You know, there are little details like that I'm always curious about. How did it happen, Radcliffe asked Triss. How could it have happened? This was supposed to be bloodless. She attacked us, muttered the sorcerer, and lowered his head. She attacked us as Vilgefortz was being escorted out. There was a scuffle. I have no idea. It's her own dagger, and we find out later that there's more to this than what it looked like. So Triss comes up, and she winds up blinding Geralt, because he's not supposed to be part of this, and him being able to see everything that's going on makes him a liability and could, you know, make him a target. So she makes sure that he isn't able to see things that he's not supposed to. But he obviously, as a Witcher, has other senses that are heightened. And they bring him up and to see Phillipa. Sorry, I think I kept calling her Priscilla. I meant Phillipa. Sabrina, find Marty Sodegren quickly. Drag her out of bed if necessary. Gedimi's in a bad way. I think it's a heart attack. Triss, find Dorogay, Drithilm, and Cardoon and bring them to Garstang. They represent the kings. Ethan and Esteret are to be informed about our operation and its consequences. You'll be taking them. And let's see. It's important how, said a cold, calm voice. The voice of Tissaia de Vry, the rustle of a dress. Tissaia was in a ball gown, not a rebel uniform. Geralt listened carefully, but could not hear the jingle of Demeritium handcuffs. Are you pretending to be worried? Repeated Tissaia. Concerned? When revolts are organized, when armed thugs are deployed at night, you have to expect casualties. Lydia is dead. And Gedimith is dying. A moment ago I saw Artaud with his face carved up. How many more casualties will there be, Phillipa Eilhart? I don't know, answered Phillipa, but I'm not backing down. Of course not. You don't back down from anything. The air vibrated and heels thudded on the floor in a familiar rhythm. He heard Philippa's breath and sensed every one of her movements. And she's questioning him, asking him how he ended up here. And he's like, I don't know how I wound up here, but I don't want to know what's going on with Yennefer. And Phillipa is like, sincerely, I don't know, and kind of be glad that you don't know, because that ensures that she's probably safe, the fact that neither of us know what's going on with her. There was a disturbance and voices. Kira Metz's soprano, Radcliffe's nasal bass, the clatter of heavy Redanian boots, and Tissaia de Vry's raised voice. How could you do that to her? She's a traitoress, responded Radcliffe's nasal voice. I will never believe that. Blood sicker than water, said Phillipa, and Emperor Emhyr has promised the elves freedom, as well as their own independent state here in these lands, after the humans have been slaughtered, naturally, and that was sufficient for her to betray us without a second thought. The person that they're talking to is Francesca, and Francesca says some things in what I believe is Elvish, and admits that that is indeed the promise that was made here. So basically, what winds up going on here is Geralt decides that whatever the fuck the coup is, like whoever winds up winning this, the only things that he is worried about is whether or not Yennefer is safe and whether or not Ciri is safe. And he winds up focusing all of his energy on getting out of this and getting to the people that he cares about. So Phillipa is in the middle of like trying to tell the Witcher to just like pretend that he never saw or heard anything, that he never spoke to Vilgefortz, and is offering him a way out to Loxia with Dijkstra. And as they are heading out to Loxia, this is when they pass by the banquet that is still just happening as if everything is fine, which I just found so hilarious. But they reach like this, they're outside and they're heading towards this ship. And let's see. His attention was caught by a colorful lone figure, conspicuous because it was moving so quickly. And it was moving uphill towards Aretuza. Right, said Dijkstra. It's time we were going. Go yourself if you're in such a hurry. Yeah, right. And you'll go back up there to rescue your beloved Yennefer and stir up trouble like a tipsy gnome, which I love. I'm definitely wanting to use that in the future. And he says, are you kidding yourself? Do you think I got you out of Aretuza because of some long-hidden love for you? I got you out because I need you. 12 young ladies from Edania's finest families are pupils at Aretuza. I can't risk a conflict with the Honorable Rectoress, but the Rectoress won't give me Cirilla. She'll give her to you, however, when you ask her. So he is doing his own whole thing here, and he wants the Witcher to get him Ciri, and the Witcher is just like, what the fuck, you want to kill her? And he's like, listen, I know that was the plan before, but now they're realizing that things can change, and that if she's alive, it might actually be worth more than dead. And the Witcher's like, does Phillipa know about this? And he says, no, she doesn't know that I know the girls in Loxia. She might put on airs and graces, but Vizimir is still the king of Redania, and I carry out his orders. I don't give a shit what the sorcerers are plotting. Cirilla will board the Spada and sail to Novigrad, from where she'll travel to Tretogor, and she'll be safe. And Dijkstra is like getting up in his face about it, and like, do you believe me? And the Witcher fucking decks him. And I have to admit, I was reading this and I like cackled because it's really out of nowhere. You know, it's just like the sudden, like, do I believe you? Here's what I believe. Bam. And he's actually pretty tough. Like, Geralt really has to fight to get this guy to go down, and deals him several blows before he manages to do it. Like, this fight goes on for a minute, and there are other Redanians that are getting involved, and it's just like, you know, kind of a disaster. And of course, Geralt's winning, but it's not like it's not like the way that you would picture where he just like hits a guy and that guy goes down and is like out for the count. They're going down, but then like getting back up again, and he keeps having to take him down again and again. So let's see. Oh, then I think this is when Dandelion shows up, right? Yeah. And he's like really flipped out when he sees what's going on with this fight, because he's basically like, these are King Vizimir's men. What you're doing is like beating up his officials, and y'all, like, you got to know that we could wind up in dungeons for this. And Dijkstra is like, oh, the scaffold, you'll be hanged. Like, get out of here. We're not dungeons. You're going to fucking die. And, you know, as usual, Geralt could really give a fuck. And he says, I'll come after you. I'll get you. And Geralt's like, is there a barber surgeon on the ship? And grabs him by the foot, jerks it, and breaks his ankle. I don't much care what they do to me after I've been quartered, muttered the Witcher. And that's the end of that scene. So he goes to try and find Yennefer. She's not in her rooms. He can't really tell which like way she is, because he's looking to see what she changed into, trying to tell if like she's wearing the conspirators outfits or if she's wearing the outfits of the like potential traitors that are being thwarted. He doesn't know what side she falls on in all of this. And there comes this like sort of, I want to say, a gauntlet of him trying to find her or find Ciri and get to all of this. And he runs into somebody who like tells him part of what happened. I'm trying to find, because there's like so much action, and I don't really need to go over all of it, like all of the people that he runs into that he's not sure, and then it turns out one way or the other which side they fall on. But let's see, I'm trying to find a good spot to like pick up. Oh yeah, here it is. They're still fighting, said Carduin, grinding his teeth. It's hot down there, one spell after another. Spells and Garstang, but there's anti-magic aura there. It was Tissaia's doing. She suddenly decided whose side she was on. She took down the blockade, removed the aura, and neutralized the Demeritium. Then everyone went for each other. Vilgefortz and Terra Nova on one side, Phillipa and Sabrina on the other. The columns cracked and the vaulting collapsed, and then Francesca opened the entrance to the cellars, and those elven devils suddenly leapt out. We told them that we were neutral, but Vilgefortz only laughed. Before we had time to build a shield, Drithhelm had been shot in the eye, Regine had been spitted like a hedgehog, which is a weird thing. Spitted like a hedgehog. Do hedgehogs get spitted that often? So, and later on, somebody's talking about, like, Tissaia bringing down the aura and, like, neutralizing that magical metal. And they really make it sound like her being able to do that is a pretty big fucking deal. Like, that was a huge play that she made. So he winds up, like, gets landed on by Kira. And she is pretty fucked up. Like, she's got a broken leg for sure. It becomes clear as they continue to talk that she's got some broken ribs because she's coughing up blood and it seems like her organs are being punctured. Like, she's in a really bad way. And she says, "Shut up and listen. It's about your Yennefer. We entered Garstang and went into the debating chamber. There's an anti-magic blockade, but it doesn't affect Demeritium, so we felt safe. There was an argument. Tissaia and the neutrals yelled at us, and we yelled at them, and Vilgefortz just said nothing and smiled. I repeat, Vilgefortz is a traitor. He's in cahoots with Emir of Nilfgaard, and he's inveigled others into the plot. Slow down, Phillipa. I know the grace and favor Vizimir surrounds you with mean more to you than the solidarity of the Brotherhood. The same applies to you, Sabrina. What does that have to do with it, Tissaia? The king's interests don't have to correspond to ours. I know perfectly well what it's about. The kings have begun the extermination of elves and other non-humans. Perhaps you, Phillipa, regard that as legitimate. Perhaps you, Radcliffe, think it's appropriate to help Demoven's forces in their hunt for the Scoia'tael. But I'm opposed to it, and it doesn't surprise me that Enid Findabair is also against it. But that's not sufficient to call it treachery. I know perfectly well what your kings were planning. I know they want to unleash a war. The measures which were meant to prevent that war may be seen as treachery by Vizimir, but not by me. If you wish to judge Vilgefortz and Francesca, do the same of me. So, Nilfgaard, and I'm trying to just make sure that I got this right. Nilfgaard is the one that is trying to make a deal with the elves and the Scoia'tael, that they will get some dedicated territory, their own country, and that is the side that was going to do some sort of like coup that got cut off by Phillipa, right? And Tissaia, well, no, that can't be right. Because Tissaia is talking about, well, oh yeah. And because Phillipa is trying to thwart Nilfgaard that's trying to make this deal. And Phillipa is doing this on behalf of the other kings who are interested in just outright slaughter of all the elves. So basically, Tissaia is just like, I understand that you think, since we're supposed to be neutral, that they are traitors, but you are supporting kings who are basically endorsing genocide, and I'm not here for that either. So y'all can pretend that they are traitors, but y'all are also fucked up and not good people, and really actually not neutral in the way you're pretending to be neutral. So you know what? I'm going to throw down with this other side, actually. Right? Am I getting it? I think I'm getting it. It's hard for me to like keep all of the parts in place. But I have to say, like, overall, Vilgefortz is a piece of shit, clearly, but I like kind of vote for Tissaia being on the right here because like they're just literally hunting down all elves and exterminating them. I'm not here for that either. So it's kind of weird because as this goes on, it feels like we're meant to really think that Phillipa, I keep calling her Priscilla, that Phillipa is in the right. And I don't feel like she is necessarily. So yeah, Emir Var Emrys made contact with Vilgefortz and bought him with promises of power and honor. Yes, Tissaia, Vilgefort's son, hero of Sodden, sold us out to become the governor and ruler of all the conquered territories of the north. Vilgefortz, helped by Terra Nova and Furkert, shall rule the provinces which will be established in place of the conquered kingdoms. It is he who will wield the Nilfgaardian scourge over the people who inhabit those lands and will begin toiling as the Empire's slaves. So, okay, Priscilla is presenting a different viewpoint, which is that while I may be representing kings who are trying to hunt down elves, these guys are trying to act like they're making a deal because they want to help elves, and that's not their aim at all. They're just getting power from another side. They're using the elves temporarily as like a leverage and allies, but the elves, like, this cause isn't more noble or better. It's just going to wind up in the enslavement of these people and the redistribution of countries and kingdoms. So it will, of course, be a Nilfgaardian protectorate, but it will suffice for the elves so long as Emperor Emir will give them a free hand to murder humans. And Tissaia is basically like, I mean, you say that. I don't really know that that's true. You don't have any proof that that's the deal that's going to happen. And I just can't be in support of this in general. So it's an interesting question because we really, as readers, don't have enough information specifically about what anyone wants to make a good judgment call. All we know is whether or not we like and believe the people who are talking about the different possibilities, and neither of them has anything like real proof. So I remain kind of on the side of Tissaia simply out of an ideological standpoint, because Phillipa's just being like, well, the elves just want to kill humans. And I'm like, is that all it is? Like, I don't really know that that's true. And it just does come across as a sort of like, you know, when we know that the elves were like stamped out as a race because of who they are, for the people in power to be like, well, the elves just want to kill us all. I can't really buy that because I'm just so used to that narrative being spun by racists in my own world that trying to believe Phillipa here feels wrong to me. But anyway, so I just wanted to get that established, like what exactly is happening here. And really quickly, I only have a couple minutes left. Ciri, there's a really touching moment where Yennefer sends her on by herself, and Ciri is really frantic, like just does not want to. She sees this as being abandoned, and Yennefer has to be like, girl, this is your only shot. If you stay here, you will die. I know it. And you're going to need to fucking get a move on while I do my best to buy you some time. And sends her down. Ciri gets caught up by a couple of guys who are like about to fucking, like Rince, first of all, comes after her. And then there's, what's the name of the one? Is it Terra Nova that catches her up later? And, oh yeah, that's right. Here it is. Would Emir look kindly on old Terra Nova? It is him. And, she gets, like, manages to escape from Rince by, like, jumping out a window and doing some of her crazy Witcher moves. And then an owl attacks Terra Nova and tears his eyes out, which is pretty fucking rad. And Phillipa is saying, this isn't the time for tenderness. Flee, the squirrels will be here soon. And she says to Ciri, you little monster, for your inopportune augury I ought to... But I made your Witcher a promise, and I always keep my promises. I don't really understand what she means by that. Augury is usually using birds as like a means of telling the future, I think. And the only thing that Ciri did that I could see is her being like, is telling this guy, because he's like, I'm not afraid of little birds. And Ciri sort of spaces out in her prophetic way and says, you should be. And that's when Phillipa attacks him. And she seems mad that Ciri saw that coming, but I don't really understand why she's so angry. Eventually, Ciri winds up having a face-off with the Black Knight that has the wings on either side of his helmet, the one that's kind of haunted her dreams. And it's an interesting moment because, like, she fights the fuck out of him, but then when she finally gets his helmet off, and looks down at his actual face, he doesn't mean anything to her anymore. It was this like mythical figure of this black knight that always haunted her. But once he's a person, it doesn't have the same effect, and she winds up letting him go, which I actually kind of liked. Personally, low-key, I do want her to kill him. But also I like the fact that there's this acknowledgement of him having become this larger-than-life figure in her mind. And the reminder that he's just a guy, and that maybe you don't have to be afraid the way that you've been because he's just a guy, like many others. I sort of liked that moment, actually. So there then comes the confrontation between Geralt and Vilgefortz. And I just have to say how much I love the fact that Vilgefortz is more than a match for Geralt. Geralt is not ready. And I'm so used to Geralt being on top when it comes to a fight. Everybody is always completely outclassed by this guy. And this time, that does not work out. So there's this moment first where he says, why did Lydia have to die? Why did you order her death? She was meant to distract attention from you, wasn't she? She was meant to give you time to become resistant to Dimeritium, to send a telepathic signal to Rince. Poor Lydia, the artist with the damaged face. Everyone knew she was expendable. Everyone knew that except her. You murdered Lydia. You used her. And now you want to use Ciri? So I like that he is able to figure out that this girl was just, a pawn. And I feel for her. That sucks. But then there comes this moment. A few weeks later, having been healed by the dryads in the waters of Brokilon, Geralt wondered what mistakes he had made during the fight, and came to the conclusion he hadn't made any. His only mistake was made before the fight. He ought to have fled before it ever began. The sorcerer was fast, his staff flickering in his hands like lightning. Geralt's astonishment was even greater when during a parry the staff and sword clanged metallically. But there was no time for astonishment. Vilgefortz attacked, and the Witcher had to contort himself using body swerves and pirouettes. He was afraid to parry. The bloody staff was made of iron and magical to boot. So yeah, he ain't ready, and this motherfucker fucks him up. Oh my god, he really does a number on him. And Geralt winds up getting saved by Triss, who's just chanting, don't die, don't die, don't die, because he's in such fucking bad shape. His head has been caved in, he's gotten an arm and a leg broken, his ribs are broken, this guy really just, it's bad. And finally, there's this whole, somebody is trying to keep them from entering, I think, one of the portals, if I'm not mistaken. And Tissaia blocks them and is telling Triss, you are on Phillipa's side and you're part of this and I should punish you. And Triss is finally can you please just, I'm not leaving him. He fell into the Redanians' hands. He's injured. And finally, Tissaia says, I shall help you. And that is the end of the chapter. So I'm curious how that's going to go. Because like I said, I'm kind of low-key on Tissaia's side. I get where Phillipa's coming from too, but genocide. Well, I'm not here for it. But I guess we'll see. And Melanie says, thank you for covering this chapter. Sorry I was late. No problem, lady. Yeah, I like this one. And I feel like I'm getting what's happening pretty well. So, yeah, I just really wonder and I don't remember exactly because I know that Ciri gets away and I don't know exactly how she gets away. Does she wind up going through another portal or something? Because it seems like there's portals all over the place now. They mentioned something having been broken and that portals were able to be opened anywhere because of the I think the anti-magic aura being brought down, if I'm not mistaken. So she might have just been able, but I don't know if she knows how to open those or if Yennefer opened it for her or what. But yeah, so I guess we'll see. But Anyway, I'm behind, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. But thank you very much, Melanie, for the commission. Hope you guys enjoyed the coverage, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.